Am I live? Is that actually true? Technical difficulties. What a shocker. Hi everybody. I guess I'm live. Tell me if you can't hear me. Uh Here we go. We're gonna do this again. We're gonna talk a little bit about the Baseball Hall of Fame. I think everybody who you probably already know what's happened here at the Baseball Hall of Fame thing, and you already probably know what the craziest news is. But I'm just going to run through it really quick and kind of give you a rundown first of what happened, and then we'll do some whatever. Hopefully, check me and hit me in the chat to make sure that I don't know how any of this works. I'm still trying to figure this out. Can you? If anybody's out there, can you just send me a quick hello in the chat? There we go. Thanks, Jeff. No, everybody knows that I don't know what I'm doing here. So welcome, everybody. Thanks for coming out to this. So let me tell you, first of all, just happened. The Hall of Fame has come in. Let me drop that down a little bit. I can talk about all the stuff behind me if you want. I got my, I guess back there, the Zach Greinke, a couple of years before him. All right, so let me go through this really quick. All right, so first of all, 3 new members of the Baseball Hall of Fame. Ichiro Suzuki obviously gets elected, does not get elected unanimously, 1 vote shy of unanimous. We'll talk about that in a minute. CC Sabathia gets in with 86.8% of the vote. By the way, total voters 394 voters total. So you needed 296 to get in. Ichiro got 393. Of course, he got the one vote shy of unanimous. CC Sabathia gets in with 342. That's 87%. And then Billy Wagner does get in, as I think we all kind of thought he would. He fell just a couple of votes shy of a few votes shy last year. He gets in pretty comfortably with 325 votes, 83%, 82.5%. So he is in, and this was his 10th and last year on the ballot. So it was pretty obvious, I think, that he was going to get the votes he needed. So those 3 guys are in. The 4th person I think everybody was watching to see if he would get in was Carlos Beltran. He did not. It looked like this year. I'm gonna while we're talking about this, I'm gonna look over here at the tracker because it seemed to me this year that the non-tracker votes this year. Although look at that, now they're showing 82%. Man, Ryan has done unbelievable. He's saying he's getting 82% of the votes in. I guess he got a whole bunch in late. But I would say that the people that are not in the tracker this year were pretty stingy. So Beltran looked really good pretty much throughout the whole period of waiting for it. I'm looking what was the latest they had for Beltran. No, this is last year's. Well, no wonder they had 82%. There you go. This is going so well. I'm so happy how this is going. 55% in on the tracker, which makes a lot more sense. And Beltran had 81.5%. So it sure seemed like he was going to at least get really close. He didn't get that close. He got 70.3% of the vote, which is close. He was 19 votes shy. But not as I thought he was going to get closer. I thought he would get 72, 73% if he fell short. But no, pretty stubborn on the blind ballots. Then right after that is Andrew Jones, got it 66%, up a little bit from last year, not a lot, up looks like about 4%, 4.6% from last year, which is fine. He'll get there. This was only his 8th year on the ballot, so he's got 2 more tries. So I think he'll get there. And then after that, nobody else really did a whole lot. It's those 5 guys pretty much dominated. Nobody else got 40% of the vote. Chase Utley was next at 39.8% of the vote. That was a pretty decent jump for him of 11%. Then Alex Rodriguez, Manny Ramirez, basically what they did last year. Andy Pettitte got a little bit of a jump, but still was only at 28%. Felix Hernandez, a pretty decent first ballot run of 20.6%. Then Bobby Abreu, Jimmy Rollins, Omar Vizquel, all about the same. Dustin Pedroia made it first ballot. Mark Burley still on the ballot. He's back. He actually was up a little bit, but not a lot. K-Rod made it on the ballot. David Wright made it for the third year, and Torrey Hunter. Torrey Hunter just barely. So last year, Torrey Hunter got 7.3% of the vote, and this year he lost almost all of that gap that he had. He ended up with 5.1%. So Torrey Hunter will be on the ballot next year, but I mean, just barely on the ballot next year. So pretty interesting. I think the first thing we have to talk about is Ichiro, and falling one vote shy of unanimous. I don't get. First of all, it doesn't matter. It totally does not matter at all that he fell a vote shy, right? He's in the Hall of Fame. It's the second highest vote total in baseball history. It doesn't matter. But that said, of course it matters to us, right? Like we're nerds about this stuff. So it does matter to us. I don't understand why somebody wouldn't vote for Ichiro. Like, I just don't understand like what possible joy they could give, unless it's like some Mariano Rivera crazed fan, which, by the way, now is not the best time to be a Mariano Rivera crazed fan. But unless there's some crazed fan that only want Mariano Rivera to be the only guy in baseball history to ever get in unanimously, I don't understand it. I'll tell you this. So I thought Greg Maddux was going to go in unanimously. That was the first one sort of my era of voting that I thought, like, who's going to vote against Greg Maddux? Like, that doesn't make any sense. Like there's literally nothing you can say against Greg Maddux except for that joke he tells about the pranks he used to pull in the shower, I guess. But there's no other real reason why you wouldn't vote for Greg Maddux. And then he didn't come that close to unanimous. And then, of course, Junior fell a couple of votes shy, which made no sense at all. Jeter fell, right? One vote. I think it was Jeter was one vote shy, I think. That made no sense. So I don't understand what anybody gets out of leaving these great players off. But of all the players to leave off, like, why would you be a Hall of Fame voter if not to vote for Ichiro Suzuki? It's like that's why we do this, right? That's why you slave over these choices and think about what you're going to do. And for me, it's like making charts and everything else. And I just don't understand at all why anybody would not vote for Ichiro. He's not only one of the greatest players in baseball history, obviously, not only record holder in all time. Although I will say this, so I wrote this down because my good friend Josh Rawich, I always thought it was Rawich, but I heard him pronounce Rawich today, so I'll do that. He gave a stat about Ichiro, unless I misheard it. Maybe one of you heard it right. Unless I misheard it, his stat was that Ichiro was the only player with 3,000 hits and 500 stolen bases. I thought that was the stat that he gave, and that's not true. And now, not only not true, it's obviously not. I mean, Ty Cobb obviously is had 3,000 hits and 892 stolen bases. And by the way, Honus Wagner also had 3,000 hits and more than 500 stolen bases. So I didn't get that. Maybe I just misheard it because Josh is really good at these things, and he does not use. He talked Japanese today. That was really cool. I just texted him and told him how great his Japanese was, and he said arigato. So that was great. Unless I misheard that, but if I heard that right, I don't understand. Maybe he was saying the only player in the last 100. I don't know. I maybe I misheard the stat, but Ichiro gets in almost unanimously, and yeah, Jeff, maybe the only foreign-born player. Although, yeah, Honus Wagner was still born in the U.S., right? He was I know his parents were immigrants, I believe. All right, CC Sabathia gets in with 86.8% of the vote. which is great, which is really great. I'm really happy. I love CC Sabathia. CC, I think my favorite CC Sabathia story was when he was, he was drafted in the first round by Cleveland, and fairly early in his career, he came to pitch in Kansas City and just dominated a really terrible Royals team in the 2000s. And Frank White was a coach for the Royals then, and Sabathia just blew them away. And after the game, I was talking to Frank, and Frank said to me, "Why is it that their first round picks look like that and our first round picks do not look like that?" Which is fair. I have a great stat for you about Sabathia. Sabathia is the only left-handed pitcher in baseball history in the 3,000 strikeout club. The only left-handed pitcher in the 3,000 strikeout club. And the reason that is because the other two left-handed pitchers who have 3,000 strikeouts both have 4,000. Yeah, the other two are Randy Johnson and Steve Carlton, both had 4. So they're in the 4,000 strikeout club. The only member of the 3,000 strikeout club is CC Sabathia. So I like that stat. Billy Wagner gets in, pretty comfortably. I wrote about this today. I'm thrilled. I'm absolutely thrilled. I voted for Billy Wagner. I'm so happy he got in. I don't see the Hall of Fame case though, and this has been over time as I've sort of come to try to understand. Like, for a while there, we all got really excited about relievers, right? When Mariano went in unanimously, and then it was like, well, if Mariano's going in, you got to put Trevor Hoffman in. He's got 600 saves, so you got to put him in. And I think we all kind of were like, well, look, Billy Wagner was about as good, if not better, than Trevor Hoffman, which I think he was, by the way. So why is Trevor Hoffman going in and not Billy Wagner? And it took a little while. Obviously, Wagner didn't have the save totals that Hoffman did, so he didn't go in quite as quickly. But over time, he built and built and built. And I get it. And I think that's one thing that I've thought an awful lot about and written some about. I'm sure a lot of you have seen that. Timing is everything in the Hall of Fame. The more I think about the Hall of Fame, the more I write about the Hall of Fame, the more I realize how utterly crucial timing is. Not only timing of when you played, but timing of when you come on the ballot. And Wagner came on the ballot at such a time where, you looked at him and said, well, nobody's as good as Mariano, right? Mariano's his own thing. Like, you could make the argument Mariano Rivera is the only reliever who should be in the Hall of Fame. I mean, I wouldn't make that argument, but you could make that argument. He's that much better than everybody else when you consider his seasons, his postseasons. I mean, he's his own thing. But when you're putting Trevor Hoffman in, it's like, okay, well, look at Trevor Hoffman and look at Billy Wagner, who was more dominant, and it seems Billy Wagner has. I did write this down. Yeah, the league hit 187 against Billy Wagner, which is the lowest batting average against any pitcher with, I think, more than 500 innings pitched. This was another Josh thing where he said it was the most of any pitcher with 900 innings pitched, because Billy Wagner threw 903 innings. So he kind of cut it off right below Billy Wagner, which I think is very funny. But I think he is, like, I don't think anybody within 500 with more than 500 innings has a lower batting average against. Yeah, 187 career batting average. His splits, as I wrote down, 187, 262 on base percentage. He did walk some people, and 296 slugging percentage. I mean, they didn't even slug 300 against him in his entire career. So dominant, and you're like, well, he's no. Trevor Hoffman was not better than Billy Wagner, and I think you look at their two careers and you're like, well, if Trevor Hoffman's in the Hall of Fame, Billy Wagner probably should be in the Hall of Fame too. And that was sort of how I viewed it. But now that we have some distance between Trevor Hoffman and now, and you look at sort of you can kind of get a clearer view of the long view of baseball history. I think once you do that, you're like, well, I mean, he only threw 900 innings. He was not a good postseason pitcher. I mean, I think if you're going to make an argument as a relief pitcher in today's game with that few innings, I mean, you need a dominant postseason record, I think. And I mean, especially now that everybody gets into the postseason, or the substantial number of players and teams get into the postseason. I think you've got to kind of dominate in the postseason in order to really, I've heard it compared, and I like the comparison of kickers in the NFL, kickers and punters, and whether or not they should go into the Hall of Fame. And it's sort of like just being really, really, really good at that, or even being the best at that, is like maybe, but I mean, I'd like to see something extra. I'd like to see a bonus kind of thing, and with Mariano Rivera, you have it. You have the incredible postseasons in addition to everything else. And with Billy Wagner, you don't. So on the one hand, I've cooled on his Hall of Fame case. On the other hand, as you can see by the voting this year, and pretty much every year, it takes something for a player to gain momentum with the baseball writers. It takes. I mean, look, there are the first ballot guys, and the first ballot guys are the greatest players ever, with very, very, very few exceptions. And so they get in right away. But for players that take a while to get in, you have to build this momentum, and it's extremely hard. And as a voter who I think my sort of main goal is to celebrate baseball and celebrate the greatest players, I would not want to stand in the way of somebody who's getting great momentum. I mean, unless there's a particular reason that I don't think they should be getting that great momentum. And that's a very different view for those of you who've been around my writing for a long time. Of course, I was one of the people sort of standing in the way of Jack Morris in the old days, where he was getting momentum, and it was more focused on Burt Blyleven and how Blyleven wasn't getting the right amount of momentum. But anyway, as I've grown older and grown old in general, it just seems to me like we're not celebrating enough of these players. I just think we're not. And I don't understand why so many people want to stand in front of the gates. Look, I'm not talking about putting in, every Frank Duffy who ever played the game, but nobody who ever gets really considered for the Hall of Fame was anything but a terrific player. And there's a line, and you've got to draw that line, and I've certainly drawn it throughout my career, but I'm not going to stand in Billy Wagner's way. I'm thrilled for him. He's a great guy. Every experience I've had with him has been terrific, and so I'm thrilled that he got in, despite my questions about sort of his overall Hall of Fame worth and what you do with relievers in general. I don't know. I see there's a question here. Do you think any other relievers will get into the Hall of Fame? That's a great question, because here's one thing that I think all of you have noticed about baseball is what makes Mariano Rivera, and in addition Trevor Hoffman and probably Billy Wagner to an extent as well, is how good they were for that length of time. They were just good every year for 15, 16, 18, 12 years. I mean, that doesn't happen much anymore. I mean, you look at guys like just look at every great reliever of the last 20 years, and what you see are players. I'm going to look up, see if I can see who have been some of the save leaders of the last bunch of years. You look them up, and they have great years. Some of them are dominant for 4, 5, 6 years. You look at them and you go, that guy's going to the Hall of Fame someday. I mean, I think that all of us felt that way about. Let me see here. Let me look up a couple of guys to kind of give a sense of this here. Let's see. Yeah, perfect example. Here we go. Craig Kimbrell. So Craig Kimbrell totally was going to the Hall of Fame. I would say through Craig Kimbrell's, so what? He led the league in saves 4 years in a row with every single year with like a nothing ERA, 1.01, 1.21, 1.61. Obviously setting strikeout records left and right. And I would say all the way up to about age 30, that guy was absolutely going to the Hall of Fame. And since age 30, no, he's not going to the Hall of Fame. I mean, it's like, I mean, he has 440 saves. I mean, I think at the end of the day, you're going to look at his career and it'll probably have some Billy Wagner-esque kind of things. But in general, that's Kimbrell seems like a perfect example to me of like a truly dominant reliever who wasn't that dominant for that long. Josh Hader has had dominant years, and you look at him and you're like, yeah, that's he's great, and then he's like not so great, and I think being a successful here's another great example, Kenley Jansen. So Kenley Jansen has been a fantastic reliever, and he did have like a long career of being really successful. But is it going to be enough? He also has 440 some saves. He's been, pretty mad the last 4, 5, 6 years. Probably not, So I think that's what I'd be looking for a reliever, is like a reliever who has 1, 2, 3, 4 unbelievably dominant years, like Emmanuel Clase had this year. You have those kinds of years, that's great, but the question is, can you sustain that for a longer period of time? And the answer for most of these guys is no, they really can't. All right, let me run through the rest of this ballot just a little bit. So Chase Utley did take a pretty big leap forward. I mean, I'd say he's the big winner of the rest of our guys. Well, you know what? I skipped over Beltran and Jones, didn't I? Yeah, let me talk about them for a second. I'll get back to Utley in a second. So Beltran did make a jump. He was 57% last year. He's up to 70% this year. And so he'll get in. He'll get in next year. I'm sure of it. I feel entirely sure, especially because nobody really comes on the ballot next year that's going to change anything. I mean, I think Cole Hamels is probably the best guy coming on the ballot next year. It's like Cole Hamels and Ryan Braun and guys like that are coming on the ballot next year. We're good. And Cole Hamels, by the way, has a very interesting Hall of Fame case, especially now that Sabathia got in. And Hamels is a guy that has that bonus thing that I was talking about. Obviously, the great postseason run. But nobody's coming on the ballot next year that I think is even a threat as a first ballot guy. So Beltran's going to definitely get in next year, and I would bet that Andrew Jones gets in next year too. So he went up 4.6%. He's up to 66.2. He's up at the 2/3 mark. He'd have to have a fairly substantial jump next year, but again, I think it's a perfect chance for him to do it, because it's going to be a pretty light ballot. There are no Ichiros next year. There are no Sabathias next year. It's going to be a great year for a lot of those guys to take their big jump. Again, timing is everything. I mean, you could see like a really big jump next year from a guy like Pettit. Like Andy Pettit could take a really big jump next year. I don't know that he will. Obviously, the PED thing seems to be sticking to him pretty hard. Felix Hernandez might take a big jump next year. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm not. Jimmy Rollins, I guess, is a guy that could take a big jump next year. I don't think A-Rod or Manny Ramirez are going anywhere. But I think some of those guys could, because it is going to be a very, very light ballot. And people like me who always vote for 10, we're gonna go deeper if we vote for 10 next year. We're going to definitely go deeper into the mix because it's going to be so light. So I think Beltran's going to get in for sure. Beltran will be in the 80s. It'd be my guess. And Andrew Jones, I think, will get in also. And Chase Utley might jump over 50% next year. This is pure prediction, but I think that those guys have an excellent chance to get in. I was talking about Utley. like I say, big jump this year. I expect a really big jump from him next year. And, once here's a funny thing about the Hall of Fame and the way this goes. Once the momentum starts rolling, you get out of the way. I mean, unless something happens. Like, I mean, obviously Omar Vizquel had tremendous momentum going, and then he had the scandal, and everything went awry, and now he's where he is. Um, but once that momentum goes, like once it started going for Scott Rowland and Larry Walker and Billy Wagner and guys like that, it just keeps going. And so, and people stop, like, thinking about, like, I think Chase Utley's Hall of Fame case is really interesting, but also really complicated. I vote for him. I voted for him this year. I voted for him, I think, both years. I'm pretty sure. And I will continue to vote for him. I think he was terrific, but a lot of it is he doesn't really fit the mold of Hall of Fame when you look at his, like, sort of regular numbers. Like, if this was 1993 or something and he came on the ballot, like, he wouldn't, I don't even know if he'd make second ballot. I mean, everybody'd be like, yeah, Chase Utley was a really good player, but he didn't win an MVP. He didn't get 2,000 hits. He didn't hit 300 home runs. He didn't, he's a really good player. There are a lot of really good players. And I think Chase Utley would have fallen into that mold of good player, not Hall of Famer. That's what I think he would have fallen into. WAR changed all of that, because WAR gives us a very solid number for him, 64.5, I think, on his WAR for Baseball Reference. His defensive stats are off the chart, and because of all of that, he's, I think, going to get elected eventually. And it just tells you about how differently we think about these things, because I think most of you would probably agree with this. Before WAR, there's no case for Chase Utley. There is a case, but there's no case that anybody would be making for Chase Utley. It is really WAR, and then you mix in what he was a hard charging player. He was a leader. The Phillies won a championship, all of those things. Then all of that would come in. But if it was before WAR, and you were looking at a guy with what were his official, let me look at his actual numbers here, because he was a guy, like I say, who, when you look at the numbers, like the way that we used to, he wasn't a 300 hitter. He had 2,000 hits in his he didn't have 2,000 hits in his career. 411 doubles. He didn't steal that many bases. I mean, you would look at a 275, 358, 465 hitter with no Gold Gloves, by the way, 0 Gold Gloves, no MVPs, and not only that, never finished top 5 in the MVP voting. No chance that anybody would be voting for him. But WAR has changed the way we view things, and probably for the best, because now we look at the overall player and really try to take into account all of these things, and also don't just trust our eyes to say how he wasn't a good defensive player, when he pretty obviously was a really good defensive player. Let me talk about A-Rod and Manny for a minute. They both stayed almost exactly in place. I know that they just have to be on the ballot because that's just the way the system works, but we're just wasting our time. Why are we doing this anymore? Like, I mean, Manny is on his 9th year, so he'll be off the ballot next year. I don't know if he'll get a little sort of boost from a few people that just kind of want to say goodbye or whatever. But I mean, there's no chance. And A-Rod, he's on his 4th ballot. I mean, we've got 6 more of these to come. We're just going to be sitting there giving A-Rod about a third of the vote, and I don't see anything that could possibly change anybody's view at this point about A-Rod and about all of this. So it's kind of depressing to think that we're just going to have to every year, like, oh, there's A-Rod again. And I feel a real obligation to vote for A-Rod, because even though I obviously, like everybody else, was not, no nobody's happy about what happened during the steroid era. And obviously A-Rod's an even bigger case because he tested, he was after testing and he lied about it and all of these other things. But A-Rod is one of the greatest players who ever lived. And I want the Hall of Fame to have the greatest players who ever lived. That's part of what I love about the Hall of Fame is you walk in and you're like, these are the greatest players who ever lived. And they're not. They're not now. There's when you don't have Barry Bonds and you don't have Roger Clemens and you don't have Pete Rose and you don't have A-Rod and you don't have Kurt Schilling and you don't have Mark McGwire and you don't have all of these guys, even Shoeless Joe. They're not the greatest players who ever lived. I mean, there are a whole bunch of the greatest players who ever lived who are not in the Baseball Hall of Fame. And I do realize that my view on that is my view on that. And that part of what is the magic of the Baseball Hall of Fame is honestly that some of those guys or all of those guys are not in there. I mean, that's, nobody, they're talking about putting, Jim Tyre in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Jim Tyre, obviously he had mental issues, but killed his wife and himself in a murder situation with the kids in the room. I mean, that's obviously, again, there's a lot going on there, but they're considering him because they're like, on the field he was one of the greatest players ever, and he was. Baseball wouldn't do that. Baseball, so there's an argument to be made that baseball's the one doing it right. But for me, I want to see the greatest players in the Hall of Fame. And so I vote for A-Rod. I vote for him every year. Let me talk about two more guys and then let's open it up to some questions. Let's talk about King Felix for a second. 20.6%, very credible showing. I don't know whether that's going to just be what it's going to be, and he's just going to sort of die there and slowly work his way off the ballot, or if he's going to gain momentum. I don't know. I mean, this is a guy with only 169 wins. I think there is a strong feeling within the at least within a portion of the baseball voters that feels really bad that Johan Santana just fell off the ballot after the first year, even though he was, the best pitcher of baseball for an extended period of time. And I think there are people that feel bad about that and kind of want to give Felix his due. And I also think that the ballot's much lighter, so you have a room for a Felix Hernandez on there. But I don't know. That number does not strike me as necessarily a number where he's going to gain a lot of momentum, but he might. I mean, he might. That's one I just don't have a great feel for. The other person I wanted to talk to about for a second, if I can get my voice back, is Omar Vizquel. So Vizquel literally got exactly the same number of votes this year as he got last year. I mean, he got 17.8% this year. He got 17.7% last year. Basically the same guy, the same thing. And he's on his 8th year, so we only have 2 more years of this, but I don't know what's happening there because obviously the substantial number of people have said, I'm not voting for Vizquel, but even though it's clear he's not going to ever be elected, there is a, fairly strong contingent of people. Let's see how many voted for him. It was 17.8%, 70 people. So 70 people said, I'm still voting for Omar Vizquel. I'm still voting for him. And that's great. I mean, I never thought Omar Vizquel was a Hall of Fame player, regardless of the off the field stuff. I think he was a terrific player, but he was a well below average hitter, and his defense was very, very good, but he was very flashy and fun, but it wasn't in the Ozzie, Smith world of shortstop for me as a defender. So if you're not going to be the best ever shortstop and you're a below average hitter, I have real questions about it. So I never thought that he necessarily was a Hall of Famer to begin with, but then all the horrible stuff came out about him and he lost, all momentum. But there are 70 people that are just like, nope, I'm sticking with Omar Vizquel. And I guess that's good. I guess if you believe that, you should keep going. All right. So let me answer a few questions before going. Let me see if I can actually call this up because they've been having some issues over at Baseball Reference. So let me see if I can actually call this up. Let's see here. Yeah. All right. So let's look who comes on the ballot next year, and then we'll take some questions. So I already mentioned that Cole Hamels is coming on. He is definitely the star coming on next year. Ryan Braun is coming on. Ryan Braun won an MVP, and Ryan Braun had a very good career. I mean, obviously, not a Hall of Famer, but could have been. Like his career sort of fell off a little bit. But interesting enough guy. Alex Gordon is coming on next year. He's a Royals Hall of Famer for sure. Alex Gordon, one of my favorite all-time players. Shin-Soo Choo is coming on a ballot. Okay, that's something. Edwin Encarnacion is coming on the ballot. Now, I love this because Edwin Encarnacion, there was a period of time, and I'm not sure who the first person was that didn't do it. I think it was Darrell Evans. But there was a period of time where 400 home run, every member of the 400 home run club was in the Hall of Fame, was going to the Hall of Fame. And so 400 home runs was the line for a very long time, like well into the 80s. Like I said, I think Darrell Evans was the first person to get 400 home runs, and immediately they were like, no, not getting in. And I very sincerely remember Dave Kingman. It looked like Dave Kingman might get to 500 home runs, and people were like really worried because they were like, does that sort of obligate us to vote Dave Kingman into the Hall of Fame? And boy, that was a stupid. Of course not. I mean, nothing obligates you ever. There was a similar thing with Johnny Damon. I think somebody just wrote about Nick Markakis getting to 3,000. Johnny Damon looks like he might get to 3,000 hits, and there were people worried, like, oh, what are we going to do? And it's like, well, you'll still vote whether he belongs in the Hall of Fame or not. Like, you don't. There are no laws that say that you have to vote in a 3,000. I mean, if you think he's worth it, then vote, but you don't have to vote in somebody just because they got to 3,000 hits. And of course, he didn't get there. Kingman didn't get to 500. There wasn't any issue. But Edwin Encarnacion hit 424 home runs in his career. So if this was 1983, they'd be talking about him as a real Hall of Fame candidate, maybe. Howie Kendrick, good player. Nick Markakis, you mentioned. 2,154 hits. He actually fell. No, wait, is that right? No, I got that wrong. He had 2,388 hits. I mean, that's a lot of hits. You know who loves hits, by the way? Is the Veterans Committee. Have you noticed that? So when they put Harold Baines in, he had all those hits. They just put Dave Parker in. He had all those hits. I think the Veterans Committee is like the one group that still like totally loves. If you have a lot of hits, they're all for you. Hunter Pence, Gio Gonzalez, Matt Kemp. Matt Kemp looked like a Hall of Fame candidate early in his career, didn't he? Jason Kipnis, Rick Porcello, the Cy Young winner. So pretty good. Chris Davis. How many home runs did Chris Davis end up with? 295. God, he hit about like 250 of them in like 4 years. So he had that crazy run. And then Edinson Volquez. Okay. I kind of thought he was still pitching. All right. So there's your list of people on the committee. All right. So let me take some questions. If you want to throw some questions at me, I'll start up at the top and let's see what we can do here. Michael wants to know, why can't baseball and the Hall of Fame get out of their own way? They so consistently ruin the moments meant to be celebrated the most. I think you're referring to Ichiro getting one vote shy. Obviously, the Hall of Fame has nothing to do with that, right? That's the baseball writers. I don't know how you guys feel about this. I've been having some mixed feelings about how open the voting is. At the Football Hall of Fame, nobody knows anything. They're not even allowed to talk about what they talk about in the meeting. Nobody knows who votes for who. Nobody knows how many votes. And I don't know. There's like a little mystery to it, maybe. It also feels incredibly secretive and closed off. And maybe that's not where baseball wants to go. But the baseball writers, for whatever complaints I have as a baseball writer, BBWAA member for almost 30 years now. whatever complaints we have, we are open. We are an open book. We tell you, virtually all of us tell you who we vote for. We all tell the baseball tracker before the votes even come out. We give you the exact vote totals. So I don't know if that's good or bad. Like, part of it's good, part of it's bad. I mean, would it have hurt anybody if we didn't know what the percentage is for Ichiro? I mean, I don't know. I mean, they all are Hall of Famers. I don't think you can put that, if Pandora's box is open. I don't think you can put it, you can change it now. But we are really, really open, and nobody else is. No, I mean, even the Veterans Committee is not this open. I mean, we as the Baseball Writers Association of America, and I'm not speaking for the BBWAA, I certainly can't do that, but we are the most open book in all of sports. We tell you everything. We tell you how many votes, and so the fact that one member of the BBWAA either purposely didn't vote for Ichiro, forgot to vote for Ichiro, like, we don't even know. Like, we have no idea why that person, and unless they come forward and say that there's a very specific reason why they didn't vote for him, which would be a courageous thing to do. I got to say, I don't think that's going to be taken well, no matter what he says or she says. But unless that person comes forward, just one person, and it might literally have been they forgot. Although I bet you, I will say this, I bet you if he sent it in, or she, I keep saying he, probably a he, but if that person sent it in and Ichiro's name was not checked off, I will bet you the BBWAA called and said, "Are you sure?" Because I mean, at this point, it's such an open book. So maybe that means that person was very sure. And look, they might keep it secret, they might not keep it secret. But people know. I mean, there are people who know who that person is. There are people in the BBWAA who know. There obviously that person knows. I would imagine that person told somebody they know. So it very well might come out, but it's a bummer because it's one person in a huge, 394 people voted, and that shouldn't cause issues. It shouldn't, and it bums me out that there's any issue on it at all. Brian wants to know, what's your opinion of the Hall of Fame tracker? I used to be a big fan, but now it takes all the drama away. The results this year were never in doubt. Well, they were a little bit. I mean, the Beltran was a little bit in doubt. I don't look. I use the tracker. I mean, it would be silly for me to say I don't like the tracker. I look at it literally every single day, and obviously use it for stuff I write over at JoeBlogs. So I think here's what I think. It does take away some of the drama. I mean, this year, maybe we don't know what's going to happen to Sabathia. Like, that's the one guy I could think of if there was no tracker. Like, I think everybody knew Wagner was going in, and Ichiro was obviously going in. It was just a question of whether it was going to be unanimous. So maybe there was I don't know, maybe not, but there might have been a little bit of drama. I don't think, here's the thing, it spreads out the story for several weeks, and I like that a lot. I like that we can talk about the Hall of Fame throughout January. That's fun for me, and so all in all, I'm still a fan of it, but I do understand, people that would say it's a little bit of a bummer to go in without, with knowing that at least some of those guys are going it in. All right, let's see here. Let's see. Brewers fan here. Do you think Ryan Braun falls off the first ballot, or does he reach 5% and stick around for a year or two? Good question. Look, if not for the PED stuff, he would have stuck. He sticks around, right? Like, I mean, won an MVP, put up a good career. So I think it's whether or not people hold the PED thing against him, and that I won't hold that again. I don't know that I would vote for him. I mean, it's he's a borderline 5% guy anyway, but for me, that's going to be the question. So predicting, I don't think he will. I don't think he'll get the 5%. That's my prediction. I hope I'm wrong. I mean, like I say, I always root for the players no matter what. Let's see here. What is the next iteration of the Veterans Committee? What group will they be voting on? That's a good question. I believe the next one we're back to the today's game, right? I think next year is today's game. Now we're not going to know the ballot of people on today's game. I'm going to type in Hall of Fame here while we're looking at it, and I'll see if I can chase down. I can't type, but I'll see if I can chase down. Here we go. What we got, but I know that yeah, I'm almost certain that next year. Let's see here. Future eligibles. All right. Oh no, this is just future eligibles. So there you go. Let's see if there's anybody that I missed on the future eligibles list. Oh, Daniel Murphy. I forgot about Daniel Murphy. Daniel Murphy was a good player. He had that one crazy postseason, right? Where he was Babe Ruth, basically. Let's see here. Looks like, here we go, era committees. So I believe next year is going to be the contemporary. No, that was this year. So the next year will be today's game, right? Why am I not finding this? Contemporary is 1980 to present day. Yeah. Here we go. December 2025 is going to be the contemporary baseball era. So that'll be players from 1980 to today. I don't remember who was on the ballot, the last one that came close, because I think that most of the people. So that was last year was the today contemporary ballot, right? Oh no, non-players was last year. So Jim Leland was voted last year, and then in 2023 was the contemporary. And here we go. So the last time this was voted, Fred McGriff went in unanimously. You'll remember that. Don Mattingly got 8 votes. Kurt Schilling got 7, and Dale Murphy got 6. I don't remember why Lou Whitaker and Dwight Evans weren't on that ballot. I don't. Oh, and you know why? It's because they decided to explore with the steroid guys. So Bonds, Clemens, and Palmeiro were all on that ballot, and none of them got even enough votes to register. So I wonder if they'll put them back on the ballot this year. I bet they don't. I think that Whitaker's got to get back on the ballot. I guess Schilling got a decent showing, so maybe he'll be back on the ballot. Mattingly and Murphy could come back on. That would be fun. Yeah, that'll be fun to look forward to that. I don't know what that's going to happen. Let's see here. Let's see. It was alluded to above. Who is the next unanimous selection? Good question. Next unanimous selection is probably the one that we'll be talking about is Pujols for sure. He's the one. Whether he, I mean, it's gotten so ridiculous that, I mean, something, there almost has to be something unusual about the player, because obviously there's only been one, and it was a relief pitcher. It makes no sense at all if you think about it in the long term. But I think Rivera was so much better than every other relief pitcher, and at the time was scandal free, religious, and all of these things that I think helped him. Played so well in the postseason and everything else. So I think Pujols will be the next one. I wonder what'll happen with Verlander and Kershaw and even Scherzer come on the ballot. Honestly, like, I don't know who voted against Adrian Beltre. I don't, to me, Chipper Jones, they didn't vote for, he didn't get unanimous. I mean, forget Willie Mays and Henry Aaron and Ted Williams and Stan Musial and those guys, because I mean, back then those voters were, they were grumps. But I don't know exactly what it'll take to get in a ballot, but I think Pujols is going to be the next one we'll be talking about for sure. Let's see here. Oh, yes, good. Wasn't it crazy? There was a time, albeit brief, that the 2 best second basemen in the National League were named Utley and Ugla. Yeah, very good. I definitely think that was a good time. Let's see here. How much as a voter do you value peak years, and how many years should that range be in order for the player to be considered, i.e. Nomar 97 to '06? So I have been really leaning heavy into peak years lately, and probably have not. In my mind, I don't think I've done a good enough job of really. That was why I voted for Felix this year. Um, Felix might not be the best example. He was very, very good for a short period of time. Um, but my thinking on this has changed. I think, to me, if you're a Hall of Famer at 30, you're probably a Hall of Famer, no matter what you do in your 30s. I mean, if you're a clear cut, no doubt Hall of Famer. I voted for David Wright this year for that same reason. I've got this feeling in my mind that average years in your 30s should not necessarily add to your Hall of Fame case. I mean, I certainly, if you're Craig Biggio and you stick around and get 3,000 hits, maybe that aids your case. But I don't think, having 4, 5, 6, okay years, one WAR years, and you add enough to like, I don't think that should matter when it comes to true greatness. And so Nomar is a very, very good example. I mean, we're talking about Utley, and I don't think Chase Utley was a better player than Omar Garciaparra. I don't. I really don't. And I vote for Utley, and I didn't vote for Garciaparra because he came on a terrible, crowded ballot, which is all about the timing we talk about. I'm of the belief, by the way, that they should reopen the they should bring back players to the ballot, players who got shut out because they were on those incredibly loaded, incredibly ridiculously, the 18 qualified Hall of Famers on one ballot. They should absolutely be given another chance. Kenny Lofton is one of those guys that I think should be given another chance. Santana is a guy. I just think, I'm not saying those guys would make it to the Hall of Fame. I don't think Nomar would get enough support necessarily, but I'd like to see him back on the ballot. I'd like to see us discussing his case in a very real way, because he was an absolutely fantastic player. Let's see here. If Utley jumps up in the balloting next year, might there be some sentiment for veterans committees to take a second look at Lou Whitaker and Bobby Grich? Good question. Answer is probably just no. I don't think the veterans committee, whatever relationship the veterans committee has to the baseball writers, it's more like a tisk kind of relationship. In other words, when the baseball writers leave Fred McGriff off the ballot or leave Jack Morris off the ballot, they love to swoop in, and they're like, oh, they're Hall of Famers. We're putting them in right now, immediately. I think they would have done that for Curt Schilling, had Schilling not ticked off so many of them with whatever he said. So I think that's how they view it. I don't think they view it at all like, oh, if the baseball writers like this guy, maybe we should reconsider this guy. I don't think that at all. I think it's the converse. I think if the baseball writers, this is my suspicion. Now, look, there are some writers on that committee. That committee is made up of Hall of Fame players, executives, and a handful, 3 or 4 baseball writers that are have won the Baseball Writers Career Achievement Award. And so those are the people that vote for it. So there are some writers on there, but all in all, I don't think the players have any real. They like the writers when they get voted in, but as for the rest of it, they don't have much faith in the writer's point of view. Let's see. Let me answer 2 more here. Let's see. Dale Murphy then. Oh, so you're asking about, Dale Murphy's chances of getting in the Hall of Fame. I've obviously been a huge proponent of Dale Murphy's. Dale is a friend of mine now, which is an incredible thing. He's a wonderful guy. And I've always felt like, Dale Murphy's Hall of Fame case itself is pretty strong, but it's not, it's borderline because he really fizzled out at 32, right? He just didn't have again, getting back to exactly what I was just talking about, Dale Murphy at 32 was a Hall of Famer, and he just didn't put up the average seasons for the rest of his career that pushed him over 400 home runs and added a little bit to his WAR and did all of those things. He just didn't do any of those things. So he ended up being a borderline case. But my thought is he also was the ultimate representative of the game, right? I mean, he won every humanitarian award you could win. He represented the game in a beautiful way. If we're gonna keep players out for not representing the game well, why wouldn't you give a tremendous number of bonus points to players for representing the game well? So I'm a very big proponent of Dale Murphy's, but so far it just hasn't happened. I've not sensed the real, like, to me, Dale Murphy and Dave Parker, their careers were incredibly similar in that they were both very dominant players when they were young. They both, Murph won 2 MVPs, but Parker won 1 MVP. And then their careers obviously diverged as Dave Parker had obviously all the issues, the drug problems and all of that, came back and put together, those average career years. I mean, he had a couple of, very good number years with home runs and RBIs toward the end of his career. But I don't see the argument that Dave Parker was a better player than Dale Murphy. I really don't. And Dale Murphy represented the game. I mean, Dave Parker's wonderful, and I love the guy. And now he's an incredible, he's had all these health issues, and he's battled through them so courageously, and I'm so happy for him. But I don't see how the Veterans Committee is voting in Dave Parker and not voting in Dale Murphy. It doesn't make any sense to me. So I wouldn't venture a guess on whether Dale Murphy is going to gain any momentum with that committee. It also depends who's on that committee. It's the other thing is they change the committee members, regularly. They move them in and out, and sometimes those committee members, like the Harold Baines committee, was built to put Harold Baines in. It was his, the owner of the White Sox and his former manager and a couple of former teammates, and I mean, it just couldn't have worked out better for him. So if Dale Murphy gets that kind of run, I think he'd have a chance. So let's see here. Let me take one final question. Yeah, good one, Mark. Why is Dwight Evans not in the Hall of Fame, and will he get in eventually? I think he's the most underrated player of my lifetime. I agree with all of that. I think Dwight Evans, honestly, if I only had one vote, and it was Dwight Evans or Dale Murphy, I would vote for Dwight Evans. I think Dwight Evans was, such a fantastic player for so long. He just, it's a lot of what happens with the Hall of Fame is you talk about it being underrated. So much of that just carries over. I mean, I think you look at that incredible outfield for the Red Sox throughout the 70s, and then obviously Fred Lynn was gone. But you have Fred Lynn, Jim Rice, and Dwight Evans. I think Dwight Evans is the best of those 3 guys. Jim Rice is in the Hall of Fame. Fred Lynn would be in the Hall of Fame probably if he never left Boston. And Dwight Evans just was the best of the 3, I think, over his total career. But he didn't. He's another guy. Didn't win an MVP. Didn't really ever. I mean, he could have, I guess, in the strike year. But I mean, they're not really considered a big star. In my younger days when I used to collect baseball cards, which I still, by the way, let me see if I can pull this out here. I don't collect cards anymore, but as you guys might know, I do a card podcast and all that. And I did just buy a card. I actually bought a card. Look at this. Look at this card. I just bought this little Bob Uecker 1966. I don't know how to do this without it shining, but look at that. It's a good card. That's a good card, Bob Uecker. In those days, they used to put cards in stars, minor stars, and commons. That's how they used to split them up. There would be, the stars pile and the minor stars. And when I was young, I used to race through all the commons to try to find the minor stars, and I would race through the minor stars to try to find the stars and whatever, because they were all different priced. It'd be like 25 cents for a stars, 10 cents for the minor star, 3 cents for a common. And Dwight Evans was always in the minor stars. Always. They always had Dwight Evans. I mean, unless he was in the commons. Sometimes he slipped back into the commons. Jim Rice was always in the stars. Fred Lynn was usually in the stars, but Dwight Evans was in the minor stars, and that just has carried over. I think he's got a good chance. I think he did pretty well when he was on the ballot the last time he was on the ballot. So I think he's got a chance. But I don't know. It's trying to predict what the Veterans Committee is going to do is always a danger. So there you go. So that's what we got today. I thank you so much for joining me on this ridiculous thing. So one more time, Ichiro 99.7%, one vote shy. CC Sabathia 86.8%. Billy Wagner 82.5%. They're your three Hall of Famers. We're gonna have a huge class this year. Those three guys plus Dick Allen and Dave Parker. So it'll be a lot of fun. It's going to be amazing to see all of those Japanese people in Cooperstown. I mean, it is going to. If you want to go to Cooperstown this year, if Ichiro is your favorite player and you want to go to Cooperstown, get your hotel ticket now. Like seriously, go try to get into the Holiday Inn. You're never getting into the Otasaga, the big hotel, but try to get in to the Holiday Inn in any one of those towns nearby, because it is going to be absolute madness in Cooperstown this year, and it's gonna be a lot of fun. And I hope I'm there. I hope to be there. So that'll be great. So thanks so much for joining, and we'll do this again. Thanks.